Okay. Three things that we look for: fractions, plus or minus signs, and squared terms. Do we have any of those? We certainly do. We do have a minus sign, but then when we see the minus sign, we're supposed to look on either side of that minus sign and see if there's factoring that can occur. I don't think there's any factoring that can occur here. So factoring, no. Fractions, no. Squared terms, yeah, right there. So let's do it. You know what I'm going to do next? Anybody know what I'm going to do next? Nicholas, do you know what I'm going to do? Any ideas? I'm going to do this. Do you know what I'm going to write up here?
The margin.
The margin, that's right. Why are we going into the margin? Because we have 1 minus cosine squared up here. And I need to find out a way to get 1 minus cosine squared out of this thing. How do I get 1 minus cosine squared from that? At this point, that's kind of like a silly question to ask, I hope. Because how do we get this to say 1 minus cosine squared? We subtract cosine squared from both sides. Now this problem says sine squared x equals 1 minus cosine squared x. So here we go. That's coming in. That's going out. Is that the right thing to do? I don't know, but I can do it, right? We've been substituting a lot with squared terms, so we might as well. So now we're taking this out, and in its place, we're going to write sine squared x. So now my problem looks like this. Okay? And again, I will ask you, after we use the toolbox, what are we supposed to do? We look at what's there and we say, what can I do now? What can I simplify? Can I add anything? Can I cancel anything out? No. These are already pushed together. And these are already pushed together, right? Even though I'm not really distributing the secant, right? Because this is just one term in here. So there's no simplifying. So what do? I go back to the toolbox. Are there any fractions in this problem? No. Are there any plus or minus signs that we might be able to factor around? No. Do we have any squared terms? Yeah, but we just did that. We're not going to undo it, okay? So that gets rid of, and here it is. Squared terms, factoring, fractions, factoring, fractions, fractions. I don't have any of those. So the only thing I can do is write everything in its sine or cosine form now. So that's what I'm going to do. I've got sine x, which is just sine x. I've got tangent x, which is sine over cosine. I've got secant x, which is 1 over cosine. And then I've got sine squared. So there's the tool. It's so hard to tell if you guys are bored, quiet, or still confused. It's so hard for me to see that. I guess I'll find out when I grade your formative assessments. We'll see if you know what you're doing or if you're just like quiet. Because how many times have we talked about it, right? Like at this point it should be like, you know what's coming next. If you've been keeping track with everything, you should be like, okay, now I'm going to multiply these. Because I used the tool, now I'm going to combine the terms. So I can do that, because I can actually multiply these together. It might make more sense if I did this, because it's a fraction now, like fractions times fractions, we just multiply straight across. So what are we going to get here? We're going to have sine squared x over cosine x. And then if I do the same thing over here, boop, boop, and I multiply, we get sine squared x over cosine x. And wouldn't you know it, those are the same. Check mark. Okay? And I hope you realize, like, what we, you know, when you do math, right, I don't want to go too far off on a tangent here. It's a little math pun, Brian. I don't want to go too far off on a tangent here, okay? But we're creating brand new neural pathways in your brain. So I don't want to get like too philosophical or too in-depth here, right? But for the last week, we've been doing weird stuff, new stuff, stuff you've never done before. Most of the time we can relate what you've done to something you've done in the past. This is brand new. Your brain didn't have the wiring to process this, okay? So please understand this. If you're bored, if you're like, why are we doing this, right? Your brain didn't have the wiring in it. It's not made to have the wiring to do this. So we have to create that network. We have to connect the neurons in your brain, right, that are going to allow you to do this on your own. But in order to strengthen those connections, we have to do it over and over and over again, and we have to continue to challenge those connections and make them work. That's how you get smarter, by creating these neural networks, and then you can process this on your own. Okay? So, if you're bored, if you're like, when are we going to do something else? I'm sorry for trying to help you become more intelligent.